So we're going to go ahead and get started. That clock's actually like 3 minutes slow. That's on the wall. Hi, I'm Michelle Rogie-Gannon. I direct the Writing Center. I want to encourage you, as you're working on your writing assignments, to come to the Writing Center. We can help you. And if you need help scheduling an appointment, we can help you do that too. Or feel free to drop in. We offer I can assist you. The yellow sheets that are on the table talk about the Writing Center. You'll see our contact information, our hours for the semester, and answers to commonly asked questions about the Writing Center. What the heck does the Writing Center do? And this will tell you. And on the back side, instructions for scheduling an appointment online. You can do this at home in your jammies on a Saturday night, but it looks more complicated than it actually is. And the other sheet, and if you want to call it lavender maybe, that's our complete list of workshops. You can see what's coming up after this. Anybody taking a class where you know you're going to be using MLA documentation, MLA style, like English 210 or something like that? Okay, a few of you. So that's coming up next, and then after that, APA documentation workshop. How many of you are taking classes that use APA style? I just know you are. You might not realize it. So there are those two workshops coming up. And some others that I think you'll find helpful, like that Writing Successful Essay Exams workshop. A lot of you will be taking midterms where you might have to do just that. I urge you to come to that workshop. And there are others on the back side. Writing the long papers. Some of you will be writing lengthy papers. It's right before spring break. And some others that are fun, like that flash fiction workshop, where you'll get to try your hand at writing flash fiction. It's fun. Chicago documentation. Anybody who might be using Chicago documentation, ask your professors what you're using for writing for style. And you might want to attend that one. There's some other good workshops, understanding using social media, resume workshop, and a few others. And I want to point out at the very end, we're having what we call a write-in. From 7 to 11 p.m. on April 25th. So it's toward the end when you might be doing that last bit of writing. Some of you might be putting together a portfolio or doing a paper at the end. And you can drop it anytime between 7 and 11. There will be free food and drink and consultants on hand in this room to help you with your writing. So I want to encourage you to take advantage of that. This workshop toward the end, we'll distribute comment cards here in the classroom, and be sure to put your instructor's name or advisor's name, whoever you want contacted, that you attended this workshop if you do want that. And we're offering PAW points. So if you want to get free PAW points, write your student ID number at the top of the comment card. So that you can get that at the end of the semester. Because there are freebies involved. I don't really know the details. So let's get started on note-taking here. Some questions for you to think about. Now, how do you learn best? You may not really have thought about that. You know, what's your learning style? What should you understand and be able to do after a class session ends? So after that 50-minute or 75-minute class or 3-hour class, as the case may be, you know, what should you understand? What should you be able to do in a session? What should you be able to understand and do at mid-semester or at the end of the semester? I mean, those are good questions to think about. And how much can you remember from class the next day? I don't know. I can remember some things from the the next day. It depends on how tired I was when I was in class. A week later, as it started to fade away. A month later, what do you remember from your class, a particular class? So there's a handout that's been distributed to you, Gardner's Theory of Multiple Intelligences, How Do You Learn? And it breaks it down into these categories: logical, mathematical, linguistic, musical, visual, spatial, bodily, kinesthetic, intrapersonal, naturalist, and existential. So I think you could probably break it down even more than that. But it's kind of helpful to think about, what kind of learner you are, and how that might affect, your taking of notes. So something to think about here, your faulty memory. I just realized I'm missing a handout. I need just a moment. Handout with a lot more notes. So this is what is known as the forgetting curve. And the idea is it shows the decline of memory in time. So how information is lost over time when there's no attempt at all to retain it, meaning no note-taking or anything. So this was developed in 1885, a long time ago, and still considered very valid. He performed an experiment, graphed his results, developed this formula for how long items remain in our memory. So some people may remember better than others, but generally speaking, this is how long we retain information. Kind of scary to think about. So for your consideration, multitasking. Multitasking does not work. You might have thought it did. So you could indeed sit at home and text on your phone, watch a television program, and do homework at the same time. Not really. There's some research that suggests that multitasking can actually make learning less effective. So reasons to put away your cell phone during class, other items that might distract you. So the study that was done, participants lost significant amounts of time as they switched between multiple tasks, lost even more time as the task became increasingly complex. So when you switch from one activity to another, you're learning more slowly, becoming less efficient, making more errors. So what they suggest, how you can avoid the dangers of multitasking: just focus on one task. Put your 100% attention on the task and continue working for, a certain amount of time, that predetermined amount of time. Be in the moment, right? Also consider taking notes by hand rather than on computer. So in a study, the researchers tested how note-taking by hand versus a computer affects learning. So notice this little quotation I put in. When people type their notes, they have this tendency to try to take verbatim notes and write down as much of the lecture as they can. So, people are typing. You ever done this? You're listening to a lecture and you're typing as fast as you can to keep up with what the person is saying, right? Trying to get everything down. Whereas students who were taking longhand notes, meaning writing by hand, they were forced to be more selective. They had to, on the spot, think about what's the most important thing here that the instructor is saying, because you can't write as fast as you can type. And by doing that, by figuring out what's most important, that extra processing of the material, that benefited them, and it will benefit you. So I love technology. I love computer. But in this case, it might not be helpful to you to type your notes. So why should you take notes? Of course, it helps you remember. I don't know about you. I have that faulty memory. I think I'm going to remember what I was told, but the next day I'm like, now what was that? It sharpens your focus. I've sometimes been sitting at really boring meetings, and the most helpful thing to do is for me to take notes so I can focus, really sharply focus on what's being said. So it helps me to, zero in on what the person is saying. It also helps you to synthesize information. The fact that you can't write down everything, that you have to think about what's the most important points here, most important info, the essentials to write down. That's got you thinking as you listen. And generally, this might shock you. Your instructors want you to take notes. They might not say so, but they really do. So there's a little quotation for you related to that. As Nels Heiberg said, over 15 years of taking classes at the undergraduate and graduate level, no professor ever told me why to take notes. When I started teaching, I never gave a reason to take notes either. If students came to me asking for help generating ideas for their writing, I would start by asking what was in their notes. Often the answer was nothing. So after that, I started telling students why they should take notes. I explained how notes could help them with future work. I pointed out how class discussions and other activities were meant to help complete their next formal assignment or something else happening later in the course. So that's from a professor's point of view, talking about notes, and also he thought about what it was like for him as a student as well. So when take notes, when the professor says, you need to know this, there's a big hint. When the professor repeats something, because probably they think it is so important. When they write on the board, oh yeah, should be writing that down. When they share information in a PowerPoint, you have to be careful here that, if it's a professor who crowds a lot of stuff onto a PowerPoint slide, which occasionally I'm guilty of, you'll need to figure out what's the most important thing here to write down. When the professor repeats anything slowly so that it can be taken down word for word, that's probably something important to write down. When they talk with greater emphasis, they're kind of excited about something, you probably want to write that down. When they use examples or hypothetical situations, and it's true, you're probably likely to see something similar on an exam, that one of those examples or hypothetical situations or something along those lines will show up on the exam. So pay attention to transitional language that your professor uses. Watch for language that shows relationships between ideas. That's helpful to you too. And often that's where professors will get their ideas for exam questions. When they use transitions like first, second, third, or they want to emphasize something especially, they might use that as a transition. Most significant or most important, they will use a phrase like that. Pay attention. However, on the other hand, that indicates what? What kind of transition? However, on the other hand, what kind of transition is that? Yeah, contrast, something else is going to come up that's different. Because, so, therefore, consequently, cause and effect, reasons for something. Paying attention to those transitions, even when the professor is speaking, that can help you in terms of the note taking. You don't want to stop taking notes during discussion periods, which I think sometimes people think, this is a time somehow to, zone out, time out from class, when really that can be a pretty valuable opportunity. You don't want to stop taking notes during those discussion periods. If your instructor puts notes on the board during a discussion period, you can take that as a good sign that the material is important. If the instructor pursues a point brought up during the discussion or takes the class in a certain direction based upon the point brought up during the discussion, then that is a strong bit of evidence that you should be taking notes. So sometimes those things show up on exams, those discussions, points brought up. And when in doubt, write it down. Few note-taking tips for you: limit the amount you write. You want to focus on significant points, questions, or references, so those can be followed up at a later date. And we're going to look at some note-taking strategies that hopefully will be effective for you based on your learning style, right? This is a chance to experiment. So we're going to look at some different ways of doing it. And you may already be using some version of one of these. So the first one, using a diagrammatical form of notes to map out the discussion with arrows linking ideas to show progression and relationships. Now I'm going to show you an example of this in just a minute. Allows you to keep a record of who said what so that you can follow up any queries later in more detail. And you can use keywords, come up with your own keywords and notation such as question marks and exclamation marks, so you can prioritize information quickly for later follow-up work. So yeah, you can write a question mark and exclamation mark quickly, right? And come back to it later. And divide your page. The idea here is to divide your page into 2 columns. Use the left-hand column to record actual comments from the discussion. Use the right-hand column to record your own ideas and responses. So again, we're going to look at a figure on this next page, example of this. So there you go. You can see on the left side there are notes from the discussion, and those are pretty organized notes in my opinion, but it's an example. Notice they have the topic at the top, the date. Over on the right side, comments for action, and they've drawn lines that are relevant to the actual notes. Now this this is good for note-taking in class, but if you think about it, you could also use it with a reading assignment that you might have. So if you were assigned a chapter in your textbook to read, what if you took notes on one side, maybe wrote down quotations from what you read, key points, and then wrote your reactions to what you read on the right side. So that's sometimes referred to as a double entry journal. But again, this is good for note-taking in class. Outlining is one you're probably really familiar with. That's the second one. Alphanumeric style. And that's where you get first main topic, second main topic, you can see listed. And then nested underneath them, A, the subtopic, B, the subtopic. And I'll show an example of this in just a minute. This is just to kind of show you the structure. Using headed, you can use headings, bullets, numbers. This is Roman numbers that we're dealing with, and letters of the alphabet, and Arabic numerals at different levels. So One tip, if you're taking notes by hand and you're using this method, allow extra space between your points so you can go back and as needed. Right? Because it's kind of a linear structure, really. And so allowing a lot of extra, this isn't showing space because it's in a PowerPoint, but you can imagine doing it on the page. And it's an effective method for most people. I mean, we're used to seeing this, right? Like if you put together an essay, you might put together an outlined structure for your essay before you write it. This works for some people. So there's an example for you. The college application process, which you all went through. You can see the first one, choose desired colleges. There's a main topic. You can, if you skip down, you can see 2, prepare application. There's another main topic, 3, compile resume. And then nested under each of those, you can see subtopics. A, visit and evaluate college campuses. B, visit and evaluate college websites. And nested underneath them, details. So number 1, look for interesting classes. 2, note important statistics. Like you can see under 2, they really dig down. They get more detailed and in specific examples there. So you can really get quite detailed in following this particular form of note taking. So the Cornell method, this is a famous method. And it really is a systematic format for condensing and organizing notes. I didn't realize I was using this method for years. I just kind of developed my own version of this. And then I saw the formal method and I was like, wait a minute, I do that. The idea is that you divide the paper into 2 columns. You got the note-taking column, usually on the right, that's twice the size of the other column. The question keyword column is on the left. So you want to leave about the bottom or about 2 inches for the summary of your notes. And so you would put your notes from the lecture or discussion in that note-taking column. Usually consists of main ideas of the text or the lecture. Long ideas will be paraphrased. You don't want to have long sentences if you can avoid them. Use symbols, abbreviations, again, exclamation points, question marks. And then relevant questions to kind of help you, which should be written down as soon as possible, so the lecture and questions will be fresh in your mind. Keywords are written in that keyword column, so you would write down a main idea and a key question after the notes are completed. And again, I'm going to show you an example of this. And then at the bottom, within 24 hours of taking your notes, again, while things are relatively fresh in your mind, you might revise, write some questions, and write a brief summary in the bottom 5 to 7 lines of the page. And that's really to help you understand the topic better. And think about this, like at the end of the semester, if you've got a notebook filled with pages like this, when you're studying for a test or even a quiz, you've got a concise but detailed, relevant record of those class sessions, right? You can be looking at the summary to remind you what a particular, discussion was about. So there's an example for you. So over on the right, you have the note-taking area. They're talking about motivational theories. And so the detailed note-taking. And then over on the left is the writer's keywords and questions. And they've got a little, visual there, graphic. They've got some page numbers. And notice that question at the bottom, why do some believe in theory X and others theory Y? And so reacting to the notes, right? Their reactions to the notes. And then at the bottom, there's a little summary. Motivational theories explain how and why people are motivated. Two motivational theories are Maslow's hierarchy of needs and theories X and Y. So again, if you were studying, you could, look at that summary at the bottom to remind you, and then dig into the notes as you need to and your reactions to them. There's also nicely, they put a date at the top. That's helpful too. Mapping is another way to do it. Take notes. And for those of you who are more visual sorts of learners, that this might be effective for you. So ideas are written in a tree structure with lines connecting them together. Have you ever done this, like when you're generating ideas for an essay? So you can do this with note-taking too. And it's just a way to visually organize your information, and for some people this might be especially effective. And it's, you might have a single point or purpose or goal that you'll put smack dab in the center of the page, and then branch outward. You'll identify all the ideas connected to that main idea or purpose or goal. You've got, notice colors, small graphics, symbols. It's helping you to visualize the information more easily. And again, you can, if you're a more visual learner, you might appreciate using this kind of method. And as we noted, it's used for planning and writing essays sometimes. And here's another example for you that's a little nicer and neater. Give the same idea. Thank you, Wikipedia Commons. So we have this example here. Tennis being the topic, and then you can see the branches going off, and you can see the subtopics, those smaller branches. So imagine the same information could be put in that traditional alphanumeric outline or one of those other note-taking structures that we just looked at. Just a different way of taking notes. Keep notes simple. Stick to keywords and very short sentences. And write out your notes in your own words, not just mechanically verbatim from a teacher or one of your classmates. One exception to this is when you hear a really good turn of phrase, you're like, wow, that's good. And that might help you to remember the note, or if you're writing out a direct quotation, you might include that word for word quote. And so we're going to practice this right now, right? This is a chance to experiment. So you've all received a handout that has a couple of pages and it's two-sided, and you'll see the methods that we just talked about. There's the to column where you can use the left-hand column to record your comments from the discussion, and then use the right-hand column to record your own ideas and responses. There's the outlining with the Roman numerals, letters of the alphabet, Arabic numerals at different levels. There's the Cornell. There's a page with the second sheet. The first side, Cornell method, you divide the paper into two columns, note-taking column, twice the side of the questions or keyword column on the left, and then you leave space at the bottom for the summary. So that's what you'll write at the end, right? And then the mapping one is the last one, and that's where ideas are written in a tree structure with the main idea in the center. So what I would challenge you to do right now is to pick a method that is different from how you usually take notes. So if you've been doing outlining, for example, for note-taking, try a different method. This is a chance to experiment and see how it works, right? Don't just do the same old thing. And so you're going to take notes here shortly. Professor Lauren Fries is going to come up here and lead a discussion, and you'll want to give her your complete attention and be following this method that you're going to use for note taking. There's a couple of quotations I'll leave you with from William Shakespeare's King Henry VI. Plantagenet, I'll note you in my book of memory. And from Marcel Proust, remembrance of things past is not necessarily the remembrance of things as they were, right? I just had to sneak in some literature. Right? So I'll stop there, and Professor Fries will take over.
Hi, everyone. I'm Professor Fries. I'm from the Department of Art, and I teach art history here. So I brought in a bit of contemporary art for our practice note-taking with today. I'd like to spend our time talking about the work of one particular artist. So we're looking at Yinka Shonibare, MBE. And MBE is an honorific. He added that to his name after he received the quote, "Most excellent of the British Empire." So he's received an award from the British Crown and is regarded as a very important contemporary British and Nigerian artist. So something about Shonibare that informs our lesson for today is that he considers himself a poet. So post-colonialism, along with appropriation, are our two key topics of inquiry for today. And what we're going to do is start by exploring a work of art that Shonibare appropriates. So I don't know if you've ever taken an art history class before. I see a few familiar faces, but many that I don't know. And we often start with looking and asking questions. So I ask you, what do you see? This is not a trick question. No takers? What do you see? Precisely. You see a woman or a girl on a swing. Why do you think you looked at her first? Someone say color? Absolutely, right? She's got that brightly colored pink dress in the contrast with all of that leafy green foliage. What else is going on here?
She's in the center of the picture.
Precisely. She's at the center of the composition. Due to the color, due to the composition, she's clearly of importance. Does everyone see this little gentleman here? What's going on with him?
Directing sight.
He's directing our site, and where, may I ask, is he directing it? She, and I would say more particularly, right up her skirt. This is a rather risque image. What you see there is her lover. They're having an affair. And do you see how he's nestled in a bed of roses? You see that big rose bush that he's hiding in? He is being treated to a special little show, right? This is a tryst in the garden. And do you see behind her this gentleman that's pulling the ropes of her swing? Swings used to have ropes. Someone else would pull it for you. She's much too dainty to be pumping her legs, yes? Who do you think is pulling her swing ropes? Some people think it's her husband. Some people think it's a local minister. But left in the dark, right? He could not see her lover there in the bushes. And then finally, you notice how she's kicking off her shoe towards that cupid, making a little shish symbol. Anyone know your French history? What does it mean for a woman to kick off her shoe? I think you've got it over there in the corner. What do you think it means? It's a release of her inhibitions, right? Sexual, a release of her inhibitions, her giving of herself to the lover. But Cupid isn't going to tell, right? Cupid, god of love, son of Venus, isn't going to disclose this information. So Shonibare appropriates this image in a contemporary work called The Swing after Fragonard. So he's directly calling out that artist. What do you see here? No. Now, why would after 1789 not have her head?
French Revolution.
Absolutely, French Revolution. A lot of the aristocracy fell victim to the guillotine. This is a direct reference to French history and the monarchy. What else do we see here? Now it's much more reduced, this scene, right? And it's in 3 dimensions, but we still have the fancy dress, although it's in a different fabric, which we'll discuss in a second. The symbol of her shoe being kicked off is still present and is highlighted. And you see all that foliage again. You remember those big leafy fluffy trees, those pastel colors? Those are earmarks of a specific French style we call Rococo. That's R-O-C-O-C-O. So he's appropriating parts of that Rococo style. Now, let's think about what's going on here. So in 2001, we have a Nigerian British artist appropriating a French painting. Why might you do that? A lot of it is about power and colonialism, right? Nigeria, while it was not a colony of French, it was a protectorate of the British Empire. And the French were an incredibly powerful force during the period in which Fragonard was painting. So we have Chonabare both appropriating the power of the French government at that period, and we also have him referencing art history, right? Art history is an important foundation for contemporary art. It's a place from which contemporary artists can work and make new innovations. So if we look at the pair together, can you spot any other compelling differences between these two? I zoomed you in a bit so you can see the Chonabare better.
Color over dress.
Excellent. So the dress is in much different fabrics. And instead of those beautiful French silks, what we have here is a fabric called batik. That's B-A-T-I-K, batik. This batik is an incredibly important part of colonial heritage in Great Britain, in Western Africa, in Indonesia, and elsewhere. What about the fact that it's in the round? You've all been to a museum, right? What's the difference between looking at a sculpture or viewing a sculpture and looking at a painting? How does it feel different? Right, you can walk around it, you can change your viewpoint in more dramatic ways. You could look behind, right? We could never look behind Fragonard's figure. It's also more on our scale, right? That would look and feel very similar to us if we stood next to it. We could become literally part of that painting, literally part of that explicit scene that's happening in this beautiful Rococo forest. So there again, you can see that beautiful fabric. You know that it is riotously colored, incredibly bright, filled with contrasting patterns, and that is one of Chonabare's hallmarks. The use of this batik fabric really defines the significance of his work in many ways. So as I mentioned, batik originates in Indonesia, and it's a relatively simple, straightforward process of pattern making called wax resist. And you could do this at home. If you take a piece of fabric and you apply wax to everything that you want to remain white, you can then dye the fabric and then remove the wax, and you'll have a pattern left behind in those open spaces, yeah? So this batik fabric is not just a pattern that's, by utilizing batik, Chonabare is drawing on these really significant traditions of cultural transfer. So you see I pulled up a map here from the Dutch Trading Company. And you'll notice that these trade routes are moving from Indonesia up to the Netherlands, up to Great Britain, and stopping over in West Africa. So the way that batik became associated with West Africa is through these Dutch trade routes. It's a method that originated in Indonesia, appropriated by Dutch traders, and then was traded to the African colonies in Western Africa. You've seen those really brightly colored African textiles, right? I suspect you've seen them all over the place. Those wax-resist textiles, in part, come from these trade routes. They appropriated indigenous African patterns and added on this batik styling. And here's a quick example of a contemporary fashion utilizing this batik. So Molisco is a Dutch fashion company, and what you have here is a Dutch company utilizing a technique, again, from Indonesia to make contemporary fashions worn around the world, but especially popular in Africa. So as we figure out what we've learned here, I brought in one last work by Shonibare. What's going on here? This is an installation exhibition. What do you see? Absolutely, books wrapped in batik. What does it mean for an artist to wrap these books by British authors, by all sorts of authors, in this batik fabric? What does it mean for Shonibare to have done this?
He likes batik a lot.
He absolutely likes batik, right? But not just for aesthetic reasons, right? It's meaningful. This batik references those trade routes. It references the appropriation of both styles and techniques. And it is in this appropriation of batik that Shonibare performs his work as a post-colonial hybrid. Yes, he performs the way that he sees himself by utilizing these techniques, putting them in contemporary art installations that make us think twice, right, about colonial contact, make us think twice about the origins of the visual world, and make us think twice about the relationships between cultures. That's all I've got for you today. Just a quick little note-taking practice. So Michelle's going to see how you did.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to pair up and share. I mean, if you're in a group of 3, that works too. And share your note-taking and compare what each came up with for taking notes. We'll take a few minutes to do that, and then we'll do a general discussion here in a few minutes.
Well, how about it on, but I don't think I can follow it that way. It's not
Let's do that.
Did you take notes along with the discussion? Did you try anything?
I did like the 2 columns. It kind of helped.
I like to write in different colors. That's like my favorite. Even though it all looks like slop, but usually I can figure out what I need to know.
And then I can see myself actually doing this.
Right.
I feel like it works for like essays, like when you're planning out what you're gonna do, or like you're trying to keep up with something. I feel like
I don't know. Or maybe like a stair step diagram if you're figuring out a step, but like otherwise I just don't.
So you might ask them which of the methods they used.
I did a couple of them did the mapping, like I did map, and then one Cornell.
Ah,
Gotcha.
okay. Just walking around the room and looking at what people did, it's truly fascinating. Just going to have people share just a little bit of what they did at their tables. So let's go over to table 2. That's where I started. What did you guys do? What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. If you can grab one of the mics and hold down the mic button. Sorry, I didn't tell you, you know? And so hold down the mic button and keep holding it down and then speak into the mic. So what method did you guys use?
We all did the mind map, and I don't think any of us liked it. It was fun to like draw it out, but I could not follow it and study from it.
Okay. So yeah, maybe in the moment it was useful, like maybe would help you to retain ideas for a little bit, but in terms of later studying, you found that might be challenging to use that mind mapping for that purpose. Okay. Okay. How about at this table, table 3? If you can grab a mic and hold down the mic button. I'd love to hear. Yeah, go ahead.
I also tried the mind map, and I didn't really care for it either. I like the outline the best.
So you gotta say, it's good that you're trying different things. You find out what doesn't work for you and what you might prefer to do instead. Now, I know a couple of these gentlemen did something interesting. You wanna maybe grab a mic there and talk into it if you would. You'll have to hold it closer to you. Okay, and hold down the mic button, yeah.
I followed my own method. So I draw a picture and make 2 column, but I'll say it doesn't match with mapping or kernel.
Okay.
But in big lectures, I for sure follow the mapping.
So use the mapping and that's a method that works for you. And interesting, right?
Yeah.
And also this time you also have 2 columns where you're note taking with that as well.
Yeah.
So again, and I know this gentleman also had his own method, yes.
Yeah, I too use a hybrid method.
It's okay, it's so that the distant students can hear.
No, that's fine. But no, it's one of those hierarchical alphanumeric schemes, which is overlaid with a mind map and room for Cornell style revisitations.
Okay, so he was experimenting and came up again with a hybrid method for note taking. Great. Okay, and how about over at this table?
All right, I use the Cornell method. I feel like I'm speaking at the UN right now. Just some light humor for you, but I don't know. It was a good method. It made me think a lot more, and I'm going to use it in class.
Great.
Have a good night.
Yeah. How about the rest of the table? What were you using? Anything different? Did any of you use a method where you went, no, there's no way I could use this in class? Sometimes that's one of the discoveries you make when you try experimenting with a new type, right? Or did you find something that worked for you, surprised you? That's part of what can happen too in this workshop. Now I know there were some interesting things going on at this table. What were you guys doing?
We did mostly the 2-column and the Cornell one. I don't know, we like kind of just said that we like to write more and yeah.
Yeah. The fact that they like to write more, and remember we talked earlier about different learning styles, and that it may be especially appealing to you to take more detailed sort of notes with words. I also think the Cornell and the 2-column, the other one, are also visual at the same time. So, hopefully, and I know that online there was some experimentation too. What were they using?
So for the online people, we had a couple of them do the Cornell method, and then a couple did the mind mapping.
Great. Okay. So I'm glad to see that this was going on, that where people were trying different approaches. And again, if it fell flat for you, then that tells you something important about that another method might work for you. But you may have also discovered something tonight that will be helpful to you in the future. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. And there are comment cards that Raya is going to distribute. Just think about it. You also may have learned a little about art tonight. Fantastic.
Speaking of that, if you ever have questions about art history, feel free to drop me an email. I've got contact information if you'd like it.
Yeah. Her name is on the shop on the purple sheet, so you can always email her again. Lauren Fries. Fries spelled just like you would expect, right?
S instead of a Z.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. And if you want POP points, make sure that you put your ID, student ID number on the front of the card at the top.
How many people tuned in online?
I believe we have a total
If you want
of
an
5
instructor or
people
advisor
online.
notified, be sure to include that information. For those who are online, you're filling out a survey link, or going to a survey link, sorry, filling out a survey. You can give your comment cards to Rye when you're finished.
They'll probably give you those other sheets too. That was fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
You brought up some different things.
Yeah, I tried to condense it a bit more and make it a little more cohesive.
Yeah, I heard some stuff you didn't say before that was,
Good.
yeah. That was good. I was like, wow, I didn't realize that, but I did when you were explaining it.
It's a fun little blurb, and you can get there without having a whole bunch of extra knowledge. I mean, it gets richer the more you know.
Right.
It's exciting right from the beginning, or I think so.
Yeah.
His work is really, if you're ever bored, give him a Google. It's
I
more than
shall.
worth your time.
Yeah. I have a sister who's an artist, but I mean, she's a homegrown artist and does very traditional
Okay.
folk art, perhaps, or decorative painting, I guess you would say. Yeah. So I have a topiary painted on the walls in my living room, you know, and
Oh,
a
how fun
fake
is that?
wainscoting.